Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Pitlane, a Formula One podcast where we discuss everything Formula One. In this episode, we will recap the Brazilian Grand Prix, and I am your host, Jordan Wynn, and joining me today is longtime F1 fan and co-host Alden Kaywell. Welcome back, Alden.
Thank you, Jordan. It's nice to be back. Nice to see you again. Happy to talk F1 today.
Yeah. We got a little bit of news before we get into the race weekend.
All right.
Haas has submitted a right to review, which, if you don't know, is a protest, essentially, of a result based on whatever they decide they want to review. And this is for track limits in Austin at the U.S. Grand Prix.
Okay, so a couple weekends back.
Correct.
Okay.
They claim that the track limits was not applied. Sorry, the track limit application of the rule, as in going over track limits, was not applied correctly to Alex Albon, Sergio Perez, and Lance Stroll.
Okay, that's quite a few drivers.
It is, and why they selected those drivers is because they finished ahead of Hulkenberg, who finished P11.
All right.
So essentially what they're trying to do is get all of those track limits applied, which would then, they would incur penalties and finish behind Hulkenberg.
So a little bit of gamesmanship here.
Correct. And why that matters, said Hulkenberg P11, and they're currently last place in the standings, constructors, and they're trying to get a few more points to work their way up.
All right. That's very interesting.
Yeah,
See how that works. What's the timeline for something like this?
I believe they have to submit it within 14 days.
Okay.
I'm not sure how long the resolution needs to be had or completed by the FIA. But yeah, just something interesting going on right now.
That'd be interesting. Let's see where that gets them. I don't know if I can remember retroactive multi-weekend past punishments or for track limit violations, but boy, that sure would be interesting if it did happen.
Yeah. Another thing with that, the FIA documents they actually sent out all had Alex Albon's name on it. Instead of Sergio Perez and Lance Stroll on their respective summons to their teams. So all of them said car 23 and not car 11 for Perez and car 18 for Stroll. Nice copy paste by the FIA.
Yikes.
Another little bit of news. Sao Paulo is going to host the Brazilian Grand Prix through 2030.
It's a nice long-term extension. It's one of the best tracks on the circuit. I can remember many years watching the last race of the year in Brazil. So it's good to keep them around. I think going forward, they probably won't be the last race of the year, but Interlagos is a great circuit. Brazil's a great racing country. There's a lot of history there. I think the drivers like it. The teams like it. Just about everyone likes being there. So this is fantastic news for F1 and fans of F1 as well.
I completely agree. Let's get into the shootout for the weekend. Sprint race this weekend, along with sprint qualifying. A little bit of news there. Ocon and Alonso crashed in SQ1.
And they were teammates last year at Alpine, and no one has really said it, but there's definitely some tension in their relationship.
Yeah, and there always kind of has been.
Okay.
Yeah, it was an interesting scenario where Alonso was on a cool down lap and Ocon was on a push lap.
This was like between turn 2 and 3, right?
Correct.
Yep. Or in the middle of turn 3 almost.
Yeah. Alonso gave enough room for Ocon.
That's right.
Ocon, little mistake.
Yeah.
Overcorrected and went right into Alonso's front left?
Yeah.
With his rear right?
Yeah. Alonso was off the racing line, had given him plenty of space. There was more than enough room. Had Ocon not had an issue, he would have just blown right by him, which was, what he wanted to do. He was on a hot lap. Some people are saying Alonso kind of turned in a little bit. Just a little bit. I mean, you can see it on the onboard.
He definitely does, but he's also looking into his mirror.
He is.
So it's kind of a natural reaction, per se.
I agree.
Because I do that in my car sometimes. If you look in the mirror, you slowly, a little drift that way.
I also think he was making that adjustment because he was expecting Ocon to go by him in the manner in which he thought he would, then allowing Alonso himself to put him back on the clean part of the track.
Correct.
It's as fans, this is an interesting piece of drama for us because they don't like each other and they crashed and they were both out for the rest of the sprint shootout. But Ocon has no one to blame but himself, quite frankly.
Yeah. Although his radio message seemed otherwise. I think he...
even his post qualifying interview, he said, I didn't lose it, and Alonso turned into me or something like that.
Which is 100% not the case. But we can go with that this week, I guess, Ocon. Sprint race, Max wins, took the lead on turn 1.
Yep.
I believe Lando was on pole.
Yep.
Didn't have a great start, and Max just did his thing, led pole to pole after that. Lando took P2 comfortably. Perez moved his way through the field, P3.
He had a great sprint.
Yep. Russell, P4. He actually did okay in the sprint race, although Mercedes kind of felt like they were on the back foot.
Yeah.
Charles Leclerc, P5. The other big news here, Yuki Tsunoda, P6. And a big 3 points for AlphaTauri. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that was huge. He had a great, quite honestly, he had a pretty good weekend, all weekend. His race wasn't quite as good as the sprint, but he looked fast. He looked comfortable. And I thought he had a great sprint race. I'm very happy for him as well. He after the
Mexico.
Yeah, after the issues with his passing in Mexico, this was a solid performance for him. It was I would almost venture to say a mature performance.
Yeah, he looked good doing it too.
Yeah.
And it looked comfortable for him.
Specifically in the sprint.
Yep. Lewis, P7. Mercedes, again, back foot. Tire wear wasn't great. And Carlos, P8. A little bit of other news. Ricardo, P9. They had a little bit of a good battle there for a few laps.
Yep.
Ricardo actually got past him through turn 1 and then DRS coming down the next straight. Carlos got him, I think, twice. And Ricardo was not happy about that second DRS zone.
No. He was lamenting its difficult nature to keep overtake completed.
Correct.
What are they? That's definitely the second longest straight on the track. They're not going to remove it. He knows that.
Right. And Carlos was playing the game too. You could see him slow up. I think the second time Ricardo, they were kind of side by side, and Carlos clearly just let him go
so he could get that DRS. Yeah.
Yep.
All right.
Get into qualifying for Sunday before we get to the race. Q3, big storm rolls in through the last
huge storm.
Yeah. Before everybody gets their first runs in, or just about as everybody's going out. And Max is first in queue. He gets his lap in pretty much, not quite complete all the way without it really affecting him. But man, everybody else had a tough time getting their laps completed.
Yeah, that storm was huge. I think if you look back, the start of the qualifying session was delayed by 15 minutes due to some on-field debris or some crash from one of the support races earlier in the day. And had that not been the case, qualifying would have not existed. They basically would have started raining immediately after qualifying.
Yep.
So it was just like someone's bad luck or someone's good luck, depending on how you look at it, with the rain rolling in right as Q3 starts. But like you said, Max got in that lap first, and there's some other surprising people up there on the top. I had thought Stroll finished P3, but looks like he ended up starting P4 with Alonso P3.
No, you were right.
Okay.
You're right. Yep, you were right. Stroll was P3. Alonso was P4.
But basically every driver that was left in Q3 was only able to complete one
decent lap.
Right.
And it was the wind had changed directions.
Correct.
I think Charles said that he had never driven in something like that where he thought it felt like it was raining, but it wasn't.
Right.
So the track just wasn't getting to his grip, even though I think he was P2 in qualifying, but it was just a weird scenario. Piastri went off at
the very last corner.
Yep, turn 12 before the long straight.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting Q3 for sure.
Well, yeah. Just seeing the giant storm clouds come through on camera was wild. It really was.
Yeah, it was night, and I think Alonso made a comment that, it's night now. And it was, 2 p.m.?
Yeah, right?
It just came out of nowhere. It was the side-by-side shots of, 10 minutes earlier is crazy to see. And we can get to the race here.
Yeah, let's go.
Formation lap.
Oof. If you're talking about a formation lap, it's not a good start.
We've seen some spin-offs before, but this was interesting. We get a snapshot on TV that all of a sudden Charles Leclerc's in the wall. And no one knows what's happened. Everyone's like, wait, what? What's going on?
And he's like, you can see the emotion coming through. That's all that's showing on the camera is him struggling to maintain composure in the car. He's not trying to get it out. He's clearly talking to himself, but he's in the wall.
Yeah. We all wondered if he bended himself.
Right.
Turns out that wasn't the case, thankfully. This way you can kind of feel bad for him. Hydraulic issue. It sounds like he lost hydraulic pressure. And and it was just going around the corner. Everything dropped and he lost control of the car.
That was what, turn 6?
Turn 6?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably about right.
Such a bummer. I think one of the radio messages, he said, how am I this unlucky?
Yeah.
He is. His car is cursed. Either he is, Ferrari is, or that car is. One of those three, or all three, right?
I'm amazed that's the first time he said that he's so unlucky.
Yeah.
That it's taken him this long with like his stint with Ferrari that he's now unlucky.
Right.
Where he wasn't before.
Right. That crash in Baku, I think a number of years ago, one would say is probably his fault. France, what was that, 2 years ago or last year? He lost it. I think that was last year.
Yeah.
Yeah, with Paul Ricard, and he lost it and then his luck with like the pit stops in Silverstone last year where he just was a sitting duck.
Yep.
All the issues he's had this year with retirements. What was that? His drive shaft or something that broke when he was on pole in Monaco a couple of years ago.
Yeah. No, was it?
Yeah.
He had crashed earlier.
He had touched a wall.
Yep.
But they didn't replace this part because if they had replaced that part, he would have started from the pit lane, which meant he had a nothing race.
Right.
So they risked it.
Yep. And then it broke.
And then he never started the race.
Yep.
The amount of DNFs, and issues that Charles Leclerc has had in non-racing incidents,
it's too high.
It is too high.
The DNSs is the big thing, right? Like,
yes.
I think he's had 3 I can count on
just
hand.
This year.
Well, no. I
don't
think 3 or 4 in total.
Oh my gosh.
Maybe 2 this year, I think. But yeah, that just doesn't happen this day and age.
No.
In Formula One. It's happened a couple of times, but not that many for one driver.
He retired on the formation lap, the poor guy.
Yeah, that's tough. Now we can get to the race since we haven't actually started it yet.
Yeah, all of 2 minutes later.
Yeah. Max gets a great start, gets out ahead, but we have a big crash in the back, causing a red flag.
Yep.
Albon going around the outside of K-Mag and Hulkenberg, I believe.
Yeah, one of the Haas's ended up being the meat in the sandwich. Albon was out on the outside, like you said. Someone else was in the middle, and someone, the second Haas driver was on the left. But it just was an unfortunate racing incident. One of the Haas's got pinched. Albon's car got all sort of out of sorts, and they crashed, and his car had substantial damage. And
I think he's the one that lost the tire.
Yeah,
too.
I was just gonna say that. Yeah, he did. And then that tire carcass kind of went flying all over the place and damaged 2 more cars before it finally settled itself down.
Yeah, that tire carcass actually hit Ricardo's rear wing. And if you see the onboard, he sees it, and he like physically ducks and turns the car to try and avoid it. But you can see on the replay, it just smacks his rear wing.
Yeah, it was always going to hit him.
Yeah, Piastri also took damage, I think, from Albon coming across the front of the Haas. And I think that's how Piastri got his rear wing damage, effectively ruining his entire race.
Yeah, both of them ended up pitting on that opening lap because they obviously had damage. But
the red flag hadn't happened yet.
Correct.
So the cars went around again, except minus Ricardo
because it was
and Piastri.
At first, it was just a safety car.
Correct. So they were like, oh, bring a car in. We got to retire the car. And like, yep, rear wings basically is useless and it's going to fall off if, it'd be dangerous for everybody. Then all of a sudden, red flag goes out as they're going around the next lap. So lap 2.
Except Ricciardo and Piastri,
who are in the garage. And with the red flags, what happens, everybody has to line up in the pit lane in the order that they, deem, I guess, at that time, which was a safety car, so they're kind of stacked up in this case. And they get lapped. Ricciardo and Piastri get lapped because they're in the garages and they can see everybody stopping in front of them in the pit lane, and there's nothing they can do. So according to the rules, I tried to figure it out, and I saw some, other armchair analysts trying to figure it out. I'm like, oh, they should have let him in, but the rule is doesn't really support that, but it seems like a flaw, because why wouldn't they allow them to maybe get out ahead after they leave the pit lane?
Right. Given that it was a red flag, both teams were able to fix the cars as much as they could. By the time they decided to restart the race, every driver that had been, all 17 drivers that were left in the race, did a formation lap from the pit lane and then took a standing start. However, Piastri and Ricciardo had to start from the pit lane because they were in the pits at the time that the red flag came out. So they weren't able to unlap themselves, like you said. And then everyone else started from the the straight
pit box.
Yep.
Or not pit, sorry.
The
starting box.
Starting grid boxes, yeah. One can see their complaints saying, why weren't we allowed to unlap ourselves? I don't think there's anything in the rules that allows something like that to happen. Some people are saying that this will incentivize teams and drivers to drive around a broken car that could be a safety hazard in the fear that if they go into the pits on an opening lap incident like that and it's red flagged, their race is over essentially.
Yep.
Had there been a second safety car during the race, there likely would have been an option for them to unlap themselves.
Because that's generally the scenario what happens.
Correct.
There's a safety car most of the time.
Right.
It's like 99% of the time.
2021.
Correct. 99% of the time, the lapped cars will be able to unlap themselves and catch them back up to the field.
And that just wasn't really an option. And like you said, could there be some sort of rule that, on a lap 1 incident, you just reset every driver to the same lap? Is there a possibility for them to unlap themselves? It doesn't really seem like that's the case.
And in the current world of Formula One, it seems like the only scenario is that they should be allowed to unlap themselves because you have a set amount of fuel. You're not refueling.
Correct.
You want everybody to have been on the same number of laps for their tires. You have your allocated tires, and you have only so many options. So I think the only feasible option would be allow them to unlap themselves, and maybe it would take an extra formation lap.
Right.
That way you're not hampering, tire warm-ups.
For other drivers, you're right.
Correct. But that was the rule currently, and that effectively ruined Ricciardo's and Piastri's race as they were lapped down. As you said, there was no other safety car, so they couldn't unlap themselves at any point in the race because you're never going to get by.
Correct.
The field, especially Max.
And when you're also probably carrying damage that still exists on the car that they were not able to fix everything.
Right.
Which is unfortunate. They both looked good in the sprint. They both had solid weekends. They both have looked good in the last few races. So, and they're both the 2 Australian drivers. It just ended up being at the very last. It's unfortunate. You wish that there would be a different outcome, but it's not the case.
It's the way it is. So maybe a little flaw in the rules. So hopefully they'll tidy that up for the next time this happens, which it probably won't for about 25 years. And someone will point to this scenario and be like, oh, yeah, do you remember that time? And most people will say no.
Right.
But someone will have the video, and here we are.
Right.
Now that the race has started a second time.
Go on.
Max wins.
What?
How?
How?
Max gets another great start. He did have a little battle briefly.
Yeah, what lap was that? It was
It was like 2
or
3. It was pretty early on.
Yeah.
After the restart, Lando was actually hanging with them with the DRS. His car was very quick on fresh tires.
the softs.
Yep. And he actually tried to overtake going into, I think it was
Turn 4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. It was the second straight. And ultimately couldn't get it done. But what do you expect? And then Max just pulls away per usual. Another comfortable win for Max, especially since there was no other safety car.
Right.
Lando.
P2.
Yeah, it's a great race from him.
Like we said, Piastri, P14.
Yeah.
Not much going. McLaren, all things considered, had a good weekend, aside from Piastri's P14. But Lando really looking like he's the chief competitor to Max at this point.
Oh, definitely.
This season. Yeah.
Definitely. He's looked good the past 3, 4, 5 weeks.
Yes, he really has. Aston Martin.
Yeah.
Finally back up on the podium.
Yeah, that Sunday was excellent for them. And Friday, I suppose, with great qualifying. But yeah, Alonso ends up P3 in the race after a great battle with Sergio Perez down the stretch.
That was so good. It was honestly some of the best racing we'd seen all season.
Easily.
Yeah.
Easily. And it felt like classic Alonso, playing his games, figuring out, how can I mess with Perez here, changing up my lines through the last few corners to try and give him an advantage, using his battery at different times, it seemed like, and Perez just couldn't finish it in the end.
Couldn't seal the deal. Does pass him on the second to last lap. But then the Fox, Alonso, gets him back on that second straight.
Yep.
On the last lap, passes him back for P3. You got to say, both Alonso and Perez had a great weekend, had a great race, both of them. That's the type of racing we want to see. That's what we want to see decide championships and decide race victories and podium finishes and points finishes. It's unfortunate that it has to be like weekend 21 of the season
Before we get
that.
Yep.
And that maybe we're looking back at that past with, not too fond of eyes, but there has been good racing this season. Not for P1, not for all the races Max has won, but there has been good racing. We talk about Singapore. The last few laps there were really interesting. This incident or this battle here, and I'm sure there were others that we just can't remember at the time or right now, but that was great. We want to see more of that.
Yeah, it was a great battle. It was good to see, these two going at it again. Alonso, like I said, P3, Perez ends up P4. He wasn't complaining about the finish. He was like, yep, it's a great battle. It was
They hugged it out.
It was a lot of fun. Yeah, they did.
They hugged it out. It was great to see.
It's good to see when they get that way, But yeah, Lance Stroll, P5, solid day.
Great for Lance. Great
Yes.
for his confidence. He had a tough Qatar. Once he got back into the U.S. and into Mexico, he did all right. But this is what, his best finish of the season? Did he have a P4 this year? He may have had a P4.
He might have had a P4, but
Yeah.
this other one, no, yeah, maybe.
But
But either way, great weekend
great
for him.
weekend.
It's good to see him back up there. This is where he needs to be.
correct. This
At
is where
least-
Aston Martin needs him to be.
Yes, they need to be him close to Alonso.
Yeah.
They don't expect him to beat him every weekend.
Right.
They need him to be near him. Unlike early in the season where he was kind of floundering a little bit, not getting those big points like
Right.
Alonso was.
So the other Ferrari, Carlos Sainz, he finished
P5.
P6.
P5, I believe, right?
Stroll finished P5.
I'm sorry, P6.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, Carlos had a quiet.
He's kind of by himself.
Yep.
Not a whole lot of action for him. I think he just kind of ran his race and did his thing. Wasn't a lot going on for him. We can get
Like we said, Leclerc did not start. It's tough for them.
yeah,
They had an opportunity to have a good weekend considering the other teams around them, chiefly Mercedes. Had a bad weekend. We'll get to them. But Leclerc not starting really feels and seems like a lost opportunity for Ferrari to claw their way back. I don't know, put some gaps between them and McLaren, because that is the battle for P3 in the constructors title.
Yeah, I think they're safe at least P3, but they definitely could have gained more
Comfort zone.
Mercedes
Yeah.
this week as well. They definitely missed out there with Charles going out
That's
early.
too bad. Alpine, what do you got for them?
Yeah, Gasly, quietly quick this weekend, ends up P7.
In the race.
Correct. Sorry. Yep, in the race. Good weekend for him.
6 points.
Ocon, P10, single point.
That's a point.
I believe there was weekend, so that doesn't hurt.
All right.
Move him up. But yeah, Gasly was quick all weekend. Ocon, P10, 1 point. We can get to Mercedes, kind of the bigger talking story here, I think, of the weekend after Lewis having 2 P2 finishes on track. One got taken away, obviously, from Austin. But yeah, he ended up P8 this weekend on the Sunday.
Not where he started the race, was it?
No, it was tough day for him. Tough day for Mercedes. Saving tires a lot. Engine overheating quite a bit.
Yep.
Had lift and coast a little bit. George was behind Hamilton, I think, on 2 stints.
Yes. Unable to pass him.
Yeah, and George was not happy on the radio.
No, he was not.
Complaining a little bit. He's like, well, are we playing the team game here? Should I try and go by him?
And I think the frustration that he felt, is certainly what I interpreted from the radio messages, was not having the understanding of what he was expected to do.
Yeah.
That side, it feels like where his frustration came from. And on the commentary, you could hear the broadcast group saying, well, surely they would have had that sorted out before the start of the race in their pre-race briefings. So how could that possibly be a surprise to George? Although, you prepare, you plan, the realities change. So I think George has legitimate questions like, what do you want me to do? I feel like I'm faster. Yes, Lewis is managing his tires, but you want me to just sit here? I'll get past eventually.
And he did.
He was.
Yeah.
Multiple times.
Yes.
And then he did not finish.
Yeah. DNF'd due to engine overheating. They decided to call it a day.
Track temps were north of 50 degrees centigrade. That's very hot.
Yeah. Too hot.
Too hot for the Mercedes.
Yeah. They've had cooling issues in the past, and this kind of exacerbated a little bit. So yeah, George DNF, Lewis P8. Tough weekend for Mercedes. Toto wasn't happy either.
Said it was his worst weekend in F1.
Ooh, I'm not sure about that.
Right. I can remember an incident in Spain that probably was worse.
Yeah.
but
they did win the title then.
Yeah.
So, bygones be bygones, I guess. AlphaTauri this weekend, Yuki Tsunoda, P9. Had a good day, but I also felt like he could have had a better day.
Yeah, I think some Yuki and Ricardo ended up sort of lapping at the same places around the track, despite Ricardo being a lap down. But Ricardo basically had to sit behind Yuki for a lot of the race. Yuki had an off, like turn 9 or something at one point during the race. He went off into the grass. But, he ended up with 5 points this weekend, which is a significant amount of points for him.
Yeah, and it gets AlphaTauri, I think, up to maybe 21 points or something like that. But get them some gap to
right.
Alfa Romeo.
Yep.
Which is huge for them.
Yeah, because they were tied going into the weekend.
Yeah.
Now they're on 21, like you said, and Alfa Romeo is still on 16.
And I don't see Alfa Romeo coming back on that with 2 to go.
They would need a lot of help for that to occur.
Yep. Ricardo, like we said, lap down, ends up P13, just kind of running his race bike back there. Had good race pace, but he started lap down essentially, and not much he can do from there.
Williams, we talked about Albon's crash in the opening turn, but our favorite American,
Logan Sargent,
he finished where?
P11. It was actually a pretty good day for him. He wasn't too far behind the rest of the pack, which was good to see. He was hanging on to Ocon, I think, toward the end. He was making his way back. But, yeah, P11, good day for him, all things considered, where he started.
Yeah, a lot of people in front of him, right? Like we said, Leclerc, Albon, who normally finishes in front of Sargent. Not that we have any dogs in the fight, but Leclerc, Albon, Piastri, Russell, Ricardo probably all would have finished ahead of him. So he had some that finish looks probably a little bit better than it really is, but hey, he'll take it.
But he finished the race.
Finished the race.
Can't I mean, can't knock that when other teams didn't.
No. Since Qatar, he's had some good finishes and some good races.
Yeah, I think his qualifying's been very lacking, though. Has been his big issue this year. And getting familiar on one lap pace. Haas, P12 with Hulk. I think he was carrying damage from the incident, too, early on. So. And K-Mag obviously DNF'd right away on that first, that lap 1 incident. And both Alfa Romeos DNF'd to separate mechanical issues.
Yeah. Tough luck.
Yeah, Audi's going to have a lot of fun coming into that team in a couple of years.
Yeah. You feel bad for Alfa Romeo Sauber. They got good drivers, a very likable group, great livery.
Yeah.
We love that.
Yep.
But it's tough. It's tough to swallow race weekends like that. That's at this point in the season, it's got to be difficult to keep your head in the right space and keep trying to, keep the spirits high and finish in the points. It's hard.
Yeah, it's a long season, and they got 2 races left. You got one more back-to-back, which is Vegas and Abu Dhabi. Why that's a back-to-back, I'm not sure.
Those are very far away from one another.
But that's where we're at after a triple header too. So tough way to finish the year. Hopefully they can have a couple good finishes toward the end to build on for 2024.
Yep.
Yeah, that basically concludes the race.
It was a good race. It was nice to see the race be sunny. Brazil likes to throw some curveballs like we saw in qualifying with the rainstorm. We've seen it rain in Brazil famously before.
Is that Glock?
Yes, it was Glock. So, yeah, I think lately they've had some great weather down in Brazil. Showcases the country really well. The race was awesome.
Fans were great.
Fans were fantastic. Looks like a great place to be.
Yeah, that's all you can ask for race weekend, really. Max, with that win, sets the new winning percentage record in a season.
With 2 races to go?
With 2 races to go.
Oh, my goodness.
He's won 17 of 20, but this is calculating if he doesn't win the last 2 races. Oh, my gosh. So he beats, a 71-year-old record from Ascari, I believe.
Wow.
Yeah, that's something that probably won't be broken. It might with a new major reg change again.
Guarantee you Max is trying to break it next year.
Yeah, no doubt in my mind. So yeah, crazy season for him, obviously. And I think he also sets the podium record for the most podiums in a year as well.
Wow.
I think he's got 19 this year.
Oh my goodness.
The only one he didn't get podium is the Singapore race. So yeah, not much more can be said about Red Bull and Max together.
Dominant.
Absolutely dominant. Quick standings update we can kind of go through.
Sure.
Red Bull, first place, obviously. That's wrapped up. Mercedes at 382 in second. Ferrari, 362. Only 20 back. Can still catch Mercedes with a couple good races. And
they actually did claw back a few points there. Right? Ended up having 2 more points than Mercedes this weekend.
Yep. McLaren at 282. I believe that one. That's about 80 points back behind Ferrari, so probably not going to catch them, but hey, a good finish for them. Aston Martin, 261. Excellent weekend.
I agreed.
Alpine, still by themselves at 108, but a good weekend for them. Williams, no points this weekend in 7th. AlphaTauri gets 5 big ones from Yuki.
Yep.
Gets him 21 points, puts him 7 behind Williams for 7th. Alfa Romeo, 16 points, and Haas with 12.
Yeah, no points from either team this weekend at the bottom there. Alfa Romeo and Haas.
Yep. Any standings changing to the drivers?
Yes, I believe Lando Norris overtook Carlos Sainz.
Oh, yeah.
Now on 195, where Carlos Sainz is on 192. Lando Norris is now only 3 points behind Fernando Alonso, despite Alonso's great finishes this weekend. Probably based on what we've seen the last couple races, you got to imagine Lando Norris ends up finishing P4 in the driver standings for the year.
Yeah, that's the big move. I think Yuki might have moved up a couple spots. Yeah, he passed Nico and Valtteri, but that's down to 14th place. But yeah, good weekend for them. Next race, Las Vegas, a couple weekends away.
Be the first year that we go to Las Vegas for a race since the 70s when they raced in the parking lot of Caesar's Palace.
Yeah, boy.
This will be on the strip rather than a parking lot. The strip is an awful lot like a parking lot most of the time, but they will clear the traffic away for the F1 cars to roll by or scream by.
Yeah. We have new pit buildings built. It's going to be a big show for everybody.
A lot of glitz, a lot of glamour. You've seen some of the things they've talked about in the build up. There's going to be like concerts and all sorts of events and hype building things. It's going to be crazy.
Yeah, it should be a lot of fun. It'll be a fun watch. Hopefully the race is as compelling as the rest of the shows going on for Vegas.
Right. One can only hope you don't want a dud of a race on your first visit there.
Yeah, especially when you have a contract for 10 years.
Oh.
So hopefully it's a good weekend.
Better be.
Yeah, should be fun. Another thing to note with Vegas, it's a Saturday race, so keep that in mind.
Yep. And it's gonna be cold, they say.
Yeah, midnight start time.
You really, I'm concerned about driver safety on this one.
You can be a little tired. Too much partying.
Tired, and if it's really that cold, the tires won't heat up and they won't be able to maintain heat in the tires, and a lot of drivers like that straight is going to be super fast, super long, and if the tires aren't warm, someone could end up in the wall. I don't want a repeat of the issues we had in Baku a couple of years ago.
Yeah, where Stroll and Max both went out to tire blowouts
at very high speed.
Yeah, it was scary. It was definitely scary. So hopefully that's not the case. I'm sure it'll be a fun weekend though. Well, thank you. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Pit Lane. This has been your host, Jordan Alden Kaywell, and we'll see you for the next episode of the Pit Lane.
See you next time.